Welcome back to A Family Food Supply. Today we're going to do something a little bit different and give you a tour of our working pantry. With our working pantry, our goal is to make the use of our bulk food supply both functional and easy. Okay, so because we do have a large amount of space on this top shelf, we do utilize it with some leveling, and I do need a step stool to get to some of these top levels. So on this top shelf, we keep most of our snack items. Now for us, that includes things like we've got tortilla chips and potato chips. We have a row of various nuts. We also have a jar or two that we keep on hand to use for leftover cereal. We eat cereal maybe like once a month, and sometimes there's leftover which gets thrown in a jar, which we can then use for a snack. In the front here, we have our dried fruits, which includes everything from coconut date rolls, dried mangoes, prunes, raisins, and everything in between. So since we do keep snacks in this pantry, along with a couple other goodies that we'll get to in a minute, we do utilize a coated door handle on this door. This helps, number one, keep little hands out of special treats, but also it keeps the pantry tidy. Only our older kids have access to this, so we can make sure that our pantry stays looking like this, as opposed to somebody coming in and throwing things all over the place. And sometimes we take Kevin's coat off as well when he gets out of hand and doesn't put things back where they belong. So on the second row here, we have our common use jars. Now, I'm not going to say that these are the ones that are used the most often, but they are the ones that are used in the largest quantity each week in our home. So that includes brown rice, white rice, oats, and sugar. Now, we don't use a lot of sugar for anything other than fermenting kombucha and kefir, but those are a regular thing, and so need to get fed often. So as I hinted at earlier, the purpose of this pantry is to make the use of our bulk food supply easier. We store the majority of our food down in our food supply room that we pull from to fill up and restock everything up here. But then when it comes to the grab and use items, things like canned vegetables, condiments, applesauce, etc., those actually stay down in our food supply room to keep things tidy and uncluttered up here in the pantry. We're really focusing on taking those items that would be more cumbersome and difficult to get into and use up here. So anything that's going to require opening up a 5-gallon bucket, digging in there, measuring out what we need, spilling food all over the place, closing it up, putting it back on the shelf. Those are the things we want to make more efficient by keeping them up here easy to use. So here on the third row is where we keep our legumes. We have beans, lentils, peas, and such. Now, I personally believe that the easiest way to use these is to soak them, cook them, pressure can them, and have them ready to go. Those jars that we keep down in our food supply room. But there are still a number of things where we use the dried legumes. So we have them here, again, for easy access. Okay, so again, our goal here is to keep things easy and simple. So one of the important parts here is that when we store our legumes down in our food supply room, they're not just dumped in a 5-gallon bucket. They're actually packaged in half-gallon Mylar bags so that when we restock, it's super simple to just grab a bag, open it up, dump it in, and we're good to go. So on this fourth shelf is where we keep our oils, vinegars, butters, and broths. We don't use a lot of pre-packaged items, but I would consider this our pre-packaged shelves because we're not making our own oils. We are making some of our own vinegars, but not quite fully yet. And the butters that are shelf stable stay in here. The butters that we make go in the refrigerator. So the one thing on the shelf that is currently packaged that ideally will not be in the future is our chicken broth. We've got a decent stock of Costco organic chicken broth that we're trying to go through before this gets replaced with the chicken broth that we are making and pressure canning. So one thing I want to mention is that when I'm doing an inventory of the food that we have on hand, I do not count anything in this working pantry. I simply go down to our food supply room and I count what we have there, because this is all stuff that we're going to go through in a short amount of time. Speaking of inventory, if you have not grabbed our grocery inventory, I've got a free download for you. You can grab that in the description box below. Okay, so on our fifth shelf, I like to kind of consider this the baking shelf. It's a little bit more than that. Over here on the far left, we keep our gluten-free flours, things like coconut flour, almond flour, cassava flour. Then next in line, we have our bread making additives, things like vital wheat gluten and sunflower lecithin. Next, we have our sweeteners. We have sucanat, coconut sugar, and monk fruit sweetener. Right here, we have our baking add-ins, things like chocolate chips, chocolate chunks, dried coconut, and dried oranges. Over here, we have some grain type products that are not commonly used, but we have breadcrumbs as well as some pasta. And then lastly, over here on the side, we have less used grains, things like barley, oat bran, and rye berries. Now, I should mention, this is not all of the food that we keep in our kitchen. We're actually missing a number of storage spaces when we're going over this pantry. We have a grain cabinet that includes most of our most common used grains. We have a spice cabinet that includes spices and seeds and a number of other things. We have a smoothie cabinet that includes our whey powder, collagen, and other smoothie add-ins. And then lastly, we have our refrigerator and freezer that also include a number of other items. Lastly, down here on the floor, we have these 3 baskets that are for onions, garlic, and potatoes. In this first basket, we keep our garlic, our yellow onions, and our red onions. In the second basket, we keep our russet potatoes. And then in this third basket that is currently empty, we usually have sweet potatoes, sometimes some red potatoes, and any other type of potatoes that we keep up here. Now, I want to put a disclaimer out there and say that it has taken us years to get to this point in having a working pantry that functions as well as this does to help serve us in using our bulk food supply. It started over a decade ago with us just starting to limit the amount of packaged foods that we bought. We then started slowly adding bulk foods into our diet to where we eventually got to the point where I was happy with what we actually had in our pantry, and then finally got to the point where I am happy with how it is stored, meaning that we have both the function and the form, which makes me super happy. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you are on this journey of building your bulk food supply, we've got a video right over here on 7 things that you're doing wrong when building your bulk food supply.